Consign Me Not to Darkness by Karevsprincess. Chapter 14, Part 3. Samuel. The battle was over, and part of him still couldn't believe that he had survived. Sam wanted to pinch himself as he unfurled a piece of parchment, pressing quill to paper. He was going to write to his mother to tell her what had happened. He knew that she probably was still grieving father and Dickon, but he hoped that word that he was safe would bring her some semblance of relief. When I went to the wall, Sam thought, I didn't think I'd ever see her again. But now the Night King was dead, and if they could just defeat Cersei Lannister, then he could return to his mother and sister at Hornhill as Lord of Hornhill. Just thinking it felt strange to him. He'd only gotten down a few words when the door opened and Gilly stuck her head into their chambers. Sam, what are you doing? Just writing to Mother. He noticed that she didn't have little Sam with her, which was odd. Usually the boy was always on her hip or toddling after her. What's going on? Queen Daenerys is awake. She wants to speak with you. With both of us. As they walked to Daenerys' sala, Sam felt nervous. Maybe she changed her mind. Maybe she's finally realised I'm not fit to be lord of anything. He should have known better than to hope he'd be able to return home. When they walked inside, Sam was surprised to see that the Queen was sitting down, laughing and bouncing little Sam on her knee. The boy laughed raucously as Daenerys kissed his cheek. She was wrapped up in a conversation with the smith, the dark-haired one who Jon had brought up from the south, who was unable to contain his grin. Evidently, whatever they'd discussed had gone in his favour. Sorry, we're almost done here, he said when he saw Sam and Gilly, quickly getting up from the table. Thank you again, Your Grace. You have no idea how much this means to me, and to Arya. Daenerys smiled. No need to thank me, cousin. You've earned it. Sam didn't know exactly what was going on, but he supposed that neither was here nor there to him, and he'd never been the nosy type. When they were alone, Queen Daenerys stood up and lifted little Sam into her arms. Such a handsome boy, she said to Gilly. How old is he? Gilly cleared her throat. 4, Your Grace. She looked as nervous as Sam felt. The Queen, however, looked perfectly at ease. I am sure you are both very proud of him, she said, and held little Sam with one arm so she could place a hand over her belly. I hope that my children and yours can grow up to be friends. I know how much Sam's friendship has meant to Jon over the years, and yours as well, my lady. Gilly blushed. I am no lady, Your Grace. Daenerys smiled slyly, like she knew something they didn't, and looked from one of them to the other. Yes, that's exactly what I brought you here to discuss. She placed little Sam down on the floor, and he immediately raced over to Gilly as fast as he could on his chubby little legs. Gilly scooped him up and kissed his head, while Queen Daenerys looked at Sam. I am not naming you Lord of Hornhill. Her words hit him like a punch to the gut, and Sam tried to hide the disappointment rushing through him at that. Oh, he said. It sounded pathetic. I see. Gilly, however, didn't take the news so lightly. But that's not fair, she objected strongly. That's his family home. If anyone should have it, it should be Sam. He could feel his face starting to grow hot, and Sam side-eyed Daenerys, only to find that she was eerily calm. Gilly. She turned to him, eyes blazing. Don't Gilly me, Samwell Tarly. You are an amazing man. The greatest man I've ever known. And if she can't see it, then that's her loss. Daenerys, however, was smiling. You love him quite a lot, don't you? Gilly hesitated, and then nodded her head. Yes, Your Grace. I love him and our son more than anything. Sam could have kissed her in that instant, and if the Queen wasn't there watching him, he would have. The Queen turned to Sam again. She is still smiling. Why is she still smiling? I am not naming you Lord of Hornhill, she repeated, because I am giving you Highgarden. Sam's breath got stuck in his chest, and he knew his face was probably turning every shade of pink. What? House Tyrell is extinct, thanks to Cersei Lannister. House Tarly has been one of the Reach's greatest houses for centuries, so it makes sense to name the rightful head of House Tarly as the new Lord Paramount. I also happen to like you a great deal, Samwell Tarly, as does my husband. Sam opened his mouth, then closed it, then opened it again. He knew he was probably gawking at Daenerys like an idiot, but he didn't care. Gilly smiled and squeezed his hand. Your Grace, I don't know what to say. Just say you accept. Sam grinned. Oh, yes, I accept. Wonderful, Daenerys said. I am happy to hear it. There is one more thing, though. She glanced at Gilly. You'll need a wife and an heir. At that moment, Sam thought his heart might burst from sheer joy. I could marry Gilly, he thought, and little Sam could legally become my son. It was more than he had ever dared to hope for. He took Gilly's hand and pulled her towards him, feeling like he was going to cry. Her eyes were already filled with tears. Gilly. He didn't know what to say, so he just decided to speak from the heart. I know a lot of words, but I don't think any of them can properly describe how much I love you. You and little Sam mean everything to me. So, would you, that is, if you want to, would you make me the happiest man in all the land and agree to be my wife? Gilly's eyes glistened with unshed tears, and she laughed breathlessly. Can I say something silly? Well, it sort of feels like we're already married. It's not silly. Sam had fallen in love with her the first time he saw her. He hadn't known that was possible before her. In his heart, he already loved her as much as any man could love his wife, and he loved little Sam as much as any man could love his own son. They were already his family, and this was just a formality. So that's a yes, Sam, I love you and I'll marry you. That time he kissed her, not caring who saw. The door opened again and Sir Jorah Mormont walked in, a familiar sword in his hands. Zooms, I arrived just in time, he said, handing Heartsbane off to the Queen. Thought you might be needing this. The Mother of Dragons smiled and lifted the sword. There was one more thing to do. Kneel, Samwell Tarly. Grinning, Sam kissed Gilly one more time, kissed little Sam on top of his head, and then knelt before the Queen. Daenerys Targaryen tapped him on one shoulder and then the other with Heartsbane. I, Queen Daenerys Targaryen of House Targaryen, first of my name, hereby name you, Samwell of House Tarly, Lord of Highgarden, Defender of the Marches, High Marshal of the Reach, Lord Paramount of the Manda and Warden of the South. For now and forever, the title is to be passed down onto your firstborn child after you, and to his heirs after him. May your rule be long and prosperous. Arise now, Samwell Tarly, Lord of Highgarden and Warden of the South. Jon. The God's Wood was quiet after dark. Even after all the chaos of the last 3 days, he felt at peace here. The God's Wood was a place that had been special to the man who had raised him, and had been special to all of the Starks, and Jon suddenly wondered how many afternoons and evenings his mother had spent here as a girl. He sat there, under the white branches and red leaves of the weirwood tree, and placed a long claw across his knee to clean it. The melancholy face in the heart tree's trunk seemed to watch over him. Sitting in comfortable silence, he methodically polished the steel. Lightbringer, the red priests and priestesses were calling it, the red sword of heroes. When he had passed Lady Kinvara in the courtyard that morning, she had bowed to him and called him Azor Ahai. They were talking about him like he was some kind of god. The son of fire who walks among mortals. Jon let them say what they liked, even if he did not feel like a god. He had done what needed to be done to save his people, and had paid the price in blood. Not only Melisandre's, but the blood of all the men and women and children who had lost their lives in the battle. His mind wandered to Bran, not for the first time in these past 3 days. A memory came to Jon of many years ago, from when Bran was no more than 5 or 6. Lady Catelyn had told him to stop climbing Winterfell's walls, and Bran had reluctantly agreed. But it was scarcely a fortnight later that Jon and Robb woke in the middle of the night to find Bran had snuck out to go climbing while they were asleep. Their father instructed Bran to go to the God's Wood for some quiet, silent contemplation. But only when they were to retrieve him later, they found him asleep on top of the God's Wood highest sentinel tree. Lord Eddard had carried him back home, careful not to wake him. John snapped out of his reverie when he heard Sansa and Arya approach. "We were starting to wonder where you ran off to," Sansa said. "Just needed to get away from it all for a while." He placed Longclaw on the ground and walked over to his sisters, both of them staring silently up at the tree. Later, they would need to discuss Bran, about what they had lost. They would need to plan how they were going to survive the rest of the winter, and make the march south to take on the Iron Throne back from Cersei. But right now, Jon was content to simply stand in the Godswood with his sisters, in comfortable silence. Arya shifted nervously from one foot to the other. She looked unusually fidgety, and Sansa smiled at her teasingly. "You're up to something, aren't you?" "What? I don't know what you're talking about." Sansa raised an eyebrow in disbelief. "Fine," Arya sighed. "I suppose I should tell you." She paused, biting down on her lip. "Gendry is talking with Daenerys right now, asking to be legitimized." "Is that what you're worried about?" Jon asked. "Dany will say yes." The thought had crossed his mind before, and surely Daenerys had thought of it too. There were many lords in the Stormlands who had yet to declare their allegiance, and if they could show them that Robert Baratheon's only living son was aligned with them, that would make many Stormlords sympathetic to their cause. It also helped Jon and Daenerys both liked Gendry and wanted to repay him for his help in the war effort. "Well, when he's done with Daenerys, he's going to ask you both for something too. Permission to take a wife." "Oh," Jon said. "Well, Tyrion was just saying we need to make political matches. Daenerys will probably have a better idea of whom to marry him to. I guess a woman from the Stormlands would to curry favour. The Penroses were always loyal to Robert, and Daenerys probably would form an alliance with the Selmys due to her past with Sir Barristan. I think Lord Artisan Selmy has a maiden cousin." "Jon," Arya cut him off. "When I said you both, I meant you and Sansa. Do you get what I'm saying?" "So he wants a northern bride?" "That's fair. Lyanna Mormont or Alice Karstark wouldn't work, since they both have their own keeps, but maybe one of the Manderleys, or the Pools, the Mazins?" "He already has a bride in mind!" Arya groaned in frustration. She glanced from Jon to Sansa, suddenly nervous again. "He's going to ask you for your permission to marry me." Jon heard Sansa's sharp intake of breath, and his own jaw physically dropped open. "Permission to what?" "Well, not permission, really," Arya said. "I don't like the concept of a woman needing to ask her family's permission to marry who she wants. But Gendry insisted on getting a blessing, at least, before we wed." She was cut off when Sansa hugged her, the strength of her unexpected embrace nearly knocking Arya over. "Arya, this is wonderful! I didn't think you'd ever—" "Hey!" Arya grumbled, her voice muffled since she was currently being crushed into Sansa's bosom. "This is so exciting!" Sansa continued to gush. "Jon, we'll have to invite Gendry to sup with us tomorrow. I need to get to know him. I mean, I do know him, but only a little. And if he is to be my good brother—" Before Jon could respond in an affirmative, she had already turned her attention back to Arya, brushing back their sister's hair, touching her face, which made Arya look uncomfortable. "Arya, you're going to be Lady Baratheon! You'll have to tell us everything. How did he ask you? When are you going to get married? What are you going to wear to the ceremony? Oh, I think some grey lace would look absolutely exquisite. I'll make your maiden cloak, of course." Arya squirmed out of Sansa's grip. "First of all, do not ever call me Lady Baratheon again. Yes, that'll be my title, but I don't want any of my family or friends to call me that. Especially not the two of you. Secondly, I asked him. Thirdly, I am absolutely not wearing a dress. If you try to make me, I'll find Gendry and we'll elope without you." Ignoring her complaints, her lower lip quivering as if at any moment she might start bursting into tears of joy. "Oh, Arya," she sighed, "I am so unbelievably happy for you." Tentatively, Arya smiled. "Thank you, Sansa. But I'm still not wearing a dress." Sansa let out a watery laugh. "Well, I have time to try and convince you." Now Arya turned her attention to him. "Jon, you've been awfully quiet." She was biting her lip, and Jon could tell that she was secretly aching for his approval, even if she wouldn't admit it. He shook his head, feeling like he might cry himself. Sometimes he forgot that Arya, his beloved baby sister, was a woman grown, now who was fully capable of protecting herself. He had to let her go into the world. But at least Storm's End and King's Landing weren't so far away. And he knew that Gendry was a good man who would love his sister and treat her honourably. He would not part with Arya for anything less. I am very happy for you, little sister. It's just hard for me to accept that you're all grown up. Arya grinned and broke away from Sansa to embrace him. Does that mean you approve? Yes, I approve. Though I might make Gendry work a little for my blessing. Arya laughed into his chest. He liked Gendry and everything, but he wasn't going to part with Arya easily, and he needed to make very clear how his sister deserved to be treated. A thought occurred to him. Jon pulled back so he could look at Arya. How did this come about, anyway? I knew the two of you liked each other, but you only just met 2 weeks ago. Arya and Sansa stared at him for a long moment, and then they both burst out laughing. Oh, Jon! Sansa said, you really can be clueless sometimes. Jon's grey eyes flitted from one of them to the other. What am I missing here? He asked, which only made Sansa and Arya laugh harder. They were still laughing, and Jon was still confused, when there was sound of footsteps approaching them. Pardon me, your grace? The squire said, bowing his head. Lady Stark, Lady Arya, but I have urgent news from King's Landing. The Queen is dead. Sansa and Arya's laughter immediately died. Jon stared at the squire, dumbfounded, and when he glanced at his sisters, he knew they were both doing the same. Which queen? Arya blurted out, even though truly they all knew well and good which queen the boy meant. Queen Cersei, he said, turning to Jon. You can read it for yourself, my king. It's all right here in the Raven Scroll. Jon took the roll of parchment and unfurled it. He was in so much shock that it took a few seconds for his eyes to adjust enough for him to read. The message was brief and written in very sloppy, panicked handwriting. It was from one of Varys' informants, a maidservant in service to Cersei at the Red Keep. But as the spider was dead, it seemed that his little birds would be chirping to them from now on. What he says is true, Jon said to Sansa and Arya. Cersei Lannister died in childbirth 3 days ago, due to childbirth complications. The letter says nothing of her child's fate, though Jon silently suspected the child was probably dead too. He felt a sudden, unexpected pang for Jaime Lannister, one father to another. Sansa walked over to Jon and snatched the letter from his hands. Let me see that, she said, and Jon did not protest. Silence hung between them for several long moments, even after the messenger left them. Sansa was reading frantically and Arya was speechless, something she rarely was. Cersei dead? Jon could scarcely believe it. Sansa's blue eyes were wide as they scanned over the letter's contents once, twice, 3 times. She's dead, she breathed, turning to Arya, and then suddenly she was laughing. Her face broke into a gleeful smile, and she actually accidentally crumpled the parchment in her hands as she brought them up to cover her face. What's wrong with you? Arya said as Sansa continued to laugh hysterically. Have you lost your wits? But her sister only took her hands, and Arya began to laugh too, and Sansa span her around. The two of them were now jumping and giggling like little maidens. You are crazy, Jon said, both of you. But he could not help but laugh too as Arya hugged him and Sansa practically squealed with joy. Oh, Jon! This is wonderful! Don't you see? Arya said, Cersei is dead! The kingdoms are yours! Mine and Daenerys's, Jon corrected, but he smiled all the same. They would still have to march south, but with Cersei gone that meant they had a chance of taking Westeros without bloodshed, which would save thousands of lives. That was, in his mind, something to celebrate indeed. He wondered if Dany knew and thought that if by some chance she didn't, she would be overjoyed when he told her. They desperately needed a piece of good news after the past 3 days. John had never dreamed of being king. He craved no crown or jewels, and he never wanted to sit the Iron Throne. Let the thing be burnt, he thought silently. The Iron Throne represents the way things were, not the way things are going to be. He and Daenerys should have their own chairs, side by side. They were going to be equals, to build a Westeros that was free and just. And then, someday, our son or daughter will continue our legacy after we are gone. Yes, in that moment, Jon Snow thought that being a king would not be so bad after all. Not when it meant he could create a Westeros where his family could be safe, and where the people could finally know peace. Sansa now wrapped her arm around Arya and pulled her into her side, leading her back in the direction of the castle. Now that we don't have to worry about Cersei any longer, Sansa said, we can focus on more important things, like the dress for your wedding. Jon could not see Arya's face, but regardless he knew she was rolling her eyes. 7 hells, Sansa. How many times do I have to tell you I am not wearing a dress? But Sansa would not take no for an answer. I can make you one you like, trust me. Perhaps grey trimmed with white, or white trimmed with grey, with a high neck and a long train. A train? Sansa, are you out of your mind? As his sisters continued to argue over raiment, Jon picked up a long claw off the ground and sheathed it at his waist. He was about to turn and follow the girls back to Winterfell, when something caught his eye. A black bird was perched at the top of the heart tree. No, Jon silently corrected himself. Not just any black bird. A raven. Jon's grey eyes met the raven's black ones, and he swore that the bird knew who he was. And Jon thought that perhaps he knew who the bird was too. The sight was enough to make him smile, and a low laugh emerged from his lips. He watched the raven fly away. Then he turned and increased his pace to catch up with his sisters. Sansa and Arya's squabble over wedding clothes had now dissolved into laughter and playful jibes. As they walked inside the castle, Jon let the familiar warmth of Winterfell envelop him and welcome him home. End of chapter and end of story. Hi guys, hope you enjoyed this. Thank you for sticking with me through this. There is a sequel and I will be doing it fairly soon. There are many Game of Thrones stories I want to do. And wow, that was so nice towards the end. Bran being in the bird and Sansa and Arya laughing at Jon being clueless while Gendry's proposal. And I love Sam and Gilly. They are such a sweet little family, which is so nice. Well, yeah. Remember to like, comment and subscribe and hit that bell to get notified whenever I upload a new video. And yeah, I love you guys. So have a good day, night, or whatever time zone you're in, my guys, gals and non-binary pals. I'll see you in another story. Bye!